Rusty, what do we know about what some of the Dogs assistants have been up to on the road, seeing some of these top-notch prospects this week?
I think for our audience, 3 names would kind of resonate. KJ Bolden at Buford, Edric Houston at Buford, and Dylan Raiola. That was kind of the thing on Monday. We came in and said Mike Bobo's in Arizona. By the way, you only get 2 visits now, so Mike Bobo uses his one of his 2 visits for the spring evaluation period. You look at Trey Scott and Fran Brown, who were both at Buford on Monday, and those 3 5-stars there, Dylan Raiola, KJ Bolden, safety wide receiver, and then Edric Houston, who everybody understands how big a target he is, and especially the need at 5 tech and defensive line for Georgia. They waste no time on Monday getting out and getting in front of those guys. People ask me all the time, what's spring evaluation? Well, the coaches get to film those kids. They get to watch them either work out, or they get to watch them practice, or they can stop by their school, and you have the entire day. So if Kirby Smart goes by and sees Wes Blankenship in the morning work out, he can come back and watch Wes Blankenship.
He'd be very disappointed.
But that's his. You get that one day, that one hit, and then you get another hit. So a lot of teams save those for spring games, those types of things. You have to be very strategic in what you do, because you only can be in front of that guy twice during the spring evaluation period, and that is over with, I believe, Monday of Memorial Day.
Man, so much to keep up with. Bruce, as you've seen some of these names and been keeping up yourself with what Georgia's coaches are looking at, and we've talked so much on this show about it's not just the talent that Georgia brings in that everyone knows is good. It's those diamonds in the rough. It's the evaluations that the scouting department makes that makes the Philadelphia Eagles GM say things like, I wish I could draft the whole team. And it all starts with these visits right here. And you can't overlook how important they are. What's jumping off the page for you, Roos, whether it's a player or a notable coach that's checking in on a guy that maybe should make Dogs fans raise their eyebrows a little bit?
Well, I think one of the important things to consider from this week was that Will Muschamp had a little surgery, and that put Scott Cochran on the road. And boy, I mentioned on the board, what a plan B that is. If that's the guy you have to turn to, the guy who brings the juice like Scott Cochran, guys love him. He connects with kids. And that's the guy that you get to send out on the road to represent your program. I think Georgia just in a fantastic spot having that as the backup plan. Rest up Muschamp for sure. But like Rusty said, I think what's key in this class and key in these visits is the 5 tech guys. You got to get those guys in for this class. The need there is pronounced. And quite frankly, that's one of the most premium positions on the field. Probably right now in terms of the NFL, it may be the most premium position on defense. Trayvon Walker, I think, kind of brought that home for everybody. Will Anderson, a guy who plays some more stand-up linebacker. But you need guys who can affect the passer, and that's what Georgia's after, guys who can get in there and get to those guys. Edric Houston, I know Justin Green was another guy that they had a chance to see this week. He's a tremendous target for them and a perfect body for that spot. So, Georgia has to keep the hammer down, because it's a thin pool of elite guys in terms of the best edge rushers in the nation. But the Dogs are in a great position with them, and they develop them about as well as anybody in the country.
I want to hop to a question we had before the show over on the DawgsHQ message board. Again, something you can access for $1 to have access to everything we have going on for 6 months. Speaking of the D-line, DawgsStradamus. I mean, if your name's DawgsStradamus, you should probably already know all the answers to every question anyway.
Been around a long time, man.
But DawgsStradamus says, will our D-line have one particular stud on it, or will it be more so a collection of high-floor guys with flash plays being less common? This doesn't have anything to do with the visits we were just talking about. I just wanted to throw a bone to one of these questions we got in the message board before the show tonight.
I don't think that's I don't think that the high floor flashes of greatness thing is off base by any means. I think Nazir Stackhouse has a chance to kind of be that alpha. Warren Brinson showed probably flashes of kind of Jalen Carter-like plays last year, probably maybe more than anybody else. I obviously think Jordan Hall's a really good player. Kristen Miller has some of those traits. Is anybody ready to do it? Nobody's ready to do it at the rate Jalen Carter did it. But we did a breakdown earlier this week, a video breakdown. And if you're not a member, I think it's a good chance to come over and see what's going on with what we're doing over at DawgsHQ. But Nazir Stackhouse is a fantastic player. And one of the things that stood out to me on film is you can't find much bad. I mean, and that speaks to that high floor thing. You just don't find a whole lot of bad. You see a lot of good. You see some great. You see some flashes of elite. And I think you're going to see that from a lot of different players. And it's just going to depend. It's going to be up to them, the individual player, whether they're able to actually finish in the backfield and make those plays that Jalen Carter, that Devontae Wyatt did. Georgia lost 3 absolutely incredible guys the past 2 drafts. All three of them going in the first round. 2 of them going to Philadelphia, 1 of them going to Green Bay, and Devontae Wyatt. It's going to be hard for anybody it's going to be hard for them to put together a trio like they had in 2021. But I think it is more of a collective effort when you think about Brinson and Logue and Stackhouse and Hall and Miller. There's a lot of potential there.
Paul, go ahead.
Absolutely a collective effort. And you're right there that they're not going to have a Jalen Carter. They're not going to have a Devontae Wyatt or Jordan Davis. But I do think that there shouldn't be that big of a drop-off with this defensive line because of the experience that they've got with a guy like Nazir Stackhouse, who there's been a lot of writing about him over the last 3 days. He's been one of the centerpieces of a story each day this week. Wrote about him today as one of the guys with a really strong chance to boost his draft stock, and wrote about him on Monday as one of the guys that's going to be replacing those guys that got picked, the Jalen Carters of the world. So I think you're right there, Jake. Brinson, and I remember us sitting in the press box looking at each other like, dang, Warren Brinson is really making some flash plays here. I think it was the Auburn game around that time, and noticeably Jalen Carter was out at that time. So we got a little bit of a taste of what Georgia's defensive line could look like without Jalen Carter. I think Bear Alexander's departure, obviously, for a very different reason than Jalen, creates another void on that defensive line. But I think that they've got the guys to not have that big of a drop off. It is going to be a group effort, but they've got enough talent that it shouldn't be too big of a fall.
The thing about Brinson and Stackhouse is they're 2 of the most entertaining guys on the team too. They have the most just outgoing personalities. They're engaging on social media. They're engaging with the media. Warren Brinson is trying to take all of our jobs. But it seems like they can also bust you up on the field too. Before we move on, Ro, you mentioned that you see elite with Nazir Stackhouse with this group as a whole. What are the things that you see that do make this group elite as you stand and watch them play from the past season?
Well, for now, depth. They're not in as good of a position to absorb a couple of injuries as they have been the past couple of years. But just from a depth standpoint, you go about 2-3 deep, 2.5, 3 deep here with guys that you don't experience a whole lot of drop off. And that's especially the case if Jonathan Jefferson can make a little bit of a move, if Jordan Hall can get himself really, really ready to play a high number of snaps, and if Christian Miller steps up. That's very much the case. And you got Tyrion Ingram-Dawkins, a guy that Rusty mentioned earlier this week. Dude, he's a big timer. I was hearing some stuff about him, I think right around midway through spring practice, where it was kind of like, man, there's still ups and downs, but the peaks are higher and the valleys are higher too. He's found a little bit more of a level of consistency, and I think Rusty will tell you right now that that guy finished spring practice off with a bang as far as practice goes, and I think Tyrion Ingram-Dawkins is a guy that they're just going to try to find ways to get him involved more, not just from that defensive end position. Rusty, you think so?
Yeah, I mean, he had the best spring he's had at Georgia, and it's time. He's a grown man. I went over to Daphne, South Carolina. I went over there.
Yes, Daphne.
Yeah, see him practice one
day,
baby. Yep, go by the big peach there on 85 and going up the road and
big butt.
Yep, saw him practice, and I thought, you know what, this guy he looks like a Georgia dude, and it's time for him. He's putting his time behind some guys that wound up being drafted, and I think we talk about that. And Michael Williams is another guy. You know, he can play so flexible. Can he play in that 5 technique and play down with his hand down, and he can stand up some. So, do they have a Jalen Carter? No, but guess what? There's not many of those. But doesn't mean there's going to be a production drop off at Georgia and say, you know, do what they do. You guys, it sounded like it's a long time ago. You remember, especially Jake Rowe and Roos covering recruiting, how Georgia got negative recruited about not having any defensive line drafted for like 6 years, man.
Yeah.
I mean, like for 6 years, they didn't have a D lineman drafted, which is insane. And those days are long gone and over. Now it's like, how many are they going to get drafted? And kind of the buzz around the place and where the NFL scouts, some of the stuff I heard is Nazir. A lot of people think that he could really make a lot of money and play himself into maybe a late first next year.